Well, if Ukraine is not successful, if the world stands by and Russia is allowed to continue to violate Ukrainian independence, and I think it sends a terrible message to others about our willingness to defend our values. When we talk about sovereignty and human rights and international law, if we're not willing to do what it takes to defend that, I think Russia is rewarded. China sees that, and other would-be authoritarian governments see that as well. So Ukrainian success and achieving full independence of all of its territory is an important step for this global order. Well, of course, it's very difficult. It's probably going slower than some people would want, but it's still, in my view, early days. I mean, if you think about the U.S. or the Allied invasion of Normandy in June of 1944, after the Allies landed with all the advantages, including air superiority, it was 2 months before they were finally able to break out of the German defenses and the hedgerows there in Normandy and start moving across France. That was 2 months after years of preparation. They had to learn, they had to innovate. And so that's how I think about what Ukraine is doing. Russia did not waste the time that we gave them as we argued over whether or not to provide tanks and other things like that. And so Ukrainian soldiers are adapting, are learning. I have great faith in the Ukrainian general staff. And of course, we don't know everything. We shouldn't know everything. I think also on the Russian side, I think that they are fragile. I think their logistics are getting pounded. Their artillery is getting pounded by Ukrainians. And I think in a few weeks, I don't want to put a date on it because I've been wrong before on my estimates. But I think we're going to see a much improved picture in a few weeks as Ukrainian soldiers figure out how to get through these Russian defenses, and as the continued effort to reduce and degrade Russian logistics continues. Of course, the two biggest advantages that the Allies had were air superiority. I mean, enormous air power compared to what the Germans had. So that was one gigantic advantage. And the other was, of course, a huge fleet that was right there in the channel that was able to provide support as well. And so these, of course, are things that the Ukrainian armed forces don't have. And so we have got to figure out a way to compensate with more long-range precision weapons, for example. This is the fault of the U.S. administration, which has done so much good otherwise. I mean, incredible amount of support, keeping 50 nations together. So that's not something that we could ignore. But the administration has stopped short of saying, we want Ukraine to win. If they say that, then I think all the things that Ukraine needs would become available. So for me, this is the key, is that the administration has to decide they want Ukraine to actually win this war. Well, that's what we have to hope. But, there's a lot of fighting going on in a lot of different places. There's still a lot of fighting that has to take place. I anticipate that General Zaluzhny and his staff have looked at different options for how to confuse the Russians, to deceive the Russians as to where the main effort will be. And I really am impressed with what they're doing with drones, both in the air and at sea, to put pressure on the Russian Navy, to put pressure on Russia's logistics infrastructure, the bridges, for example. This is all an important part of it. And that all of these things are going on at the same time, I think improves or increases the chances that Ukraine will achieve a breakthrough at some point. Look, I don't think any Russian soldiers want to be there. I think that as the constant pounding takes place, the logistics continue to be disrupted. Eventually, Ukraine is going to create that gap, and then I think they're going to be able to exploit that. But it's still going to take time. I think some of the journalists who have been watching this, and these are journalists, a lot of them are good ones that are there on the ground watching the fighting themselves, but they had expectations, and then when it doesn't turn out exactly as they expected, they assume that Ukrainians have changed something. I think the Ukrainian soldiers are famous, as good as any in the world, of any country, at adapting and innovating based on what they see in front of them. And so I think when it became clear you can't just drive through a minefield, or that the Russian defenses maybe were thicker and tougher than we had anticipated, and we had not given Ukraine enough equipment to help get through these minefields, then Ukrainian soldiers do what they do best, which is adapt and innovate and come up with different ways of doing things. And I think that's what's going on. Well, I think what the Ukrainian General Staff is doing now is the right thing. Of course, clearing a path through minefields is extremely dangerous and difficult, but it's even worse if you're getting hit with artillery while you're trying to do it. And so the Ukrainian approach seems to be to go after Russian artillery, to degrade it, both by destroying the actual artillery, but also destroying the logistics, the ammunition necessary for the artillery. And I think continuously doing that, and also making it difficult for Russia to reposition troops from one area to another area, also helps to give time and take pressure off of the Russian or the Ukrainian engineers who are trying to create a gap through these minefields. So I think, given all the things that they have, I think they're doing the best they can with what they have. I don't know. I've never known for sure how long Russia can do what they're doing. Clearly, they have sustained a lot of casualties. Clearly, they have lost thousands of pieces of equipment. Their Air Force doesn't want to go anywhere near Ukrainian airspace. The Navy doesn't want to go anywhere near Ukrainian coastline. So, and we know that sanctions have had an effect, that Russia's ability to produce rockets and missiles and ammunition is less than it was a year ago, but they can still produce. So, my assumption is that they will keep doing this as long as Vladimir Putin believes he can win. When he decides he can no longer win, then it's over. So the target is really inside his mind. When he realizes that there's no way that Ukraine is going to stop, when he realizes that there's no way the West is going to stop supporting Ukraine, when he realizes that he is going to lose Crimea, then I think he changes the narrative, and it's over. But as long as he thinks that he can hold out, and of course he doesn't care how many of his own soldiers are killed, that doesn't matter to him. And apparently it doesn't matter too much to Russian people. As long as he thinks he still can win, then I think this will go on.